This is Gemara in Kiddushin and Daf Ches, and all the learning for this month. The month of Elul has been generously sponsored as an incredible schos aliyas neshama for Rezel Basra Meir b'siyata dishmaya. The learning of the entire Chabura Baruch Hashem as we enter into our second week of Miseches Kiddushin should bring us to Rezel Basra Meir, an incredible aliyas neshama, bringing you closer to the Kisei HaKavod. We pick it up on Zayin Abayis, 3 lines from the wide lines, continuing the discussion that we were middle of, as we will see in a moment. We begin with a case. Ahu Gavra, there was a guy, the Kaddish Bishirai, that he married his wife with silks. Rabba Amar says, Rabba, lo yitzricha shuma. The silk does not need an evaluation. Rav Yosef Amar, no. Tzricha shuma, we have to evaluate the silk. Explains the Gemara. If he said, I'm marrying you with whatever it is, on the last arrow line, then of course, there's no machlokes. Why would he have to evaluate? He said, I'm marrying you with the silks, whatever quantity, whatever value the silk is, then of course there's no reason to evaluate it. But explains the Gemara on the first white line, and on the other hand, let's say he said it's worth 50, and in reality, lo shavu chamshin. So why is there any reason why it should work? Halei shavu. So keep ligi. So when does this machlekes Rabbi and Rav Yosef apply? Whether you need to do an evaluation or not. Keep ligi damar chamshin v'shavu chamshin. And it's indeed worth that which he said. Rabbi amar lo tzrichi shuma. You don't need to evaluate it. Da shavu chamshin. It's worth 50. Rav Yosef Amar Tzricha Shuma. Why? Kivan Disa, since a woman loy beki b'shuma, she does not know its evaluation. Loy sam chadaita. So according to Rav Yosef, the reason why we're going to need an evaluation is to ensure and to ease her mind that it's indeed worth that which he says. Continues the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Ika de Amri. Another way of learning that which we said, Bakaldu Nami Pligi, that they argue even when it's worth, even when he said whatever it's worth. And the Gemara explains what would the machlekes be on the last line of Zayin Beis. Rav Yosef Amar Shava Kasef, Hareu Kikasef. Rav Yosef says that anything worth money is the same as money. So he gives her silk. He says whatever it's worth. Says Rav Yosef, this is the same thing as if he gave her cash. And therefore, ma kasef dikayitz. Kasef, when you hand her a $50 bill, it's clearly defined that which it is. Therefore, that is an integral ingredient, says Rav Yosef. And therefore, similarly, ishavu kasef nami dikayitz. So similarly as well, when something is worth kasef, it has to also be something definitive, and therefore Rav Yosef says you need to do an evaluation to ensure that it's worth that what it says and make it kayitz. And Amar Rav Yosef in the top line of Chesed and Aleph, Rav Yosef continues and explains, Mina Aminallah, where do I know this? Where do I get this idea that it has to be a definitive dollar point? Titania, we learned in a Braisa. Mikazeh Migna, so he says the Torah for the money of his purchase, a pasuk in Vayikra. From here we learn out, B'kasevu Nigna, you acquire with kasef. Ve'inai Nigna B'tvua. Rashi keys us in on the 3rd line from the top. We're talking about an Eved Ivri purchasing. The Gemara says you purchased Eved Ivri with kasef and now with tvua. Now with tvua v'kelim. Hi tvua v'kelim hechidami. Says the Gemara, explains Rav Yosef this brayso. What is the case of attempting to acquire an Eved with wheat and vessels? Hey chidami. If the case is that you cannot be purchased with these items at all, Yoshev Gula Sayam can't be, because the Torah says he pays for his redemption. And from there at Pasik, the rabbis, that itself includes Shava Kasef Kikasef, that when he buys himself out, he could indeed he could indeed buy himself out with that which is shava kesef. Rashi points out that the word yashiv is the extra word. V'delasu shava pruta. And if the Tvu and Kelim are not worth the Shava Pruta, then of course you can't purchase with that. That even money itself, if it's not worth a Shava Pruta, doesn't work. So what is the case that Mikesef Miknasai, and we deduce only Kesef Miknasai and not Tvu V'Kelim? Elolav, what must it be talking about? The Isbu Shava Pruta. It's indeed worth a Shava Pruta. But what's the reason why Tfu and Kelim will not work? V'kivon de loy kaitzi loy, because it's not kaitz, it's not definitive. It's an article of item. It's a keli or it's Tfu, and there's no definitive dollar value on it, and that's why it does not work. That is the source, says Rav Yosef. Why you need something to be definitive? Says the Gemara Rabbah argued on Rav Yosef in the bottom of Amud Beis. So what does he do with this drasha? According to Rabbah, this is what he says. You know what it teaches us? It teaches us that that which you can purchase an eved, and you cannot purchase something with the Torah of Tvuah Kelim. What does that mean? Explains the Gemara, my nihu. What exactly does this mean to purchase something? B'toiras Tvuah Kelim. Explains the Gemara, Chalipin. This refers to Chalipin. And ask the Gemara, 1 second, but what about to Rav Nachman? According to Rav Nachman, which holds, well, Rav Nachman Damar, Peiros Loi Avdi Chalipin. Rav Nachman holds, Peiros does not work with Chalipin, my Ego L'meimar. What else can you say? And therefore, there's no tzad that Tvu and Kelim can refer to Chalipin. Eloloilam delasvu shava pruta. So when the pasuk says Mikas Miknasai Bekasvu Nikne Nikne Betua Kelim explains the Gemara according to Rav Nachman, it must be that it's now worth the shava pruta. Udkamrin, and that which you asked in my area Tvu Kelim. Why specifically Tvu and Kelim? Afilu Kesef Nami Loi mi bai. Afilu Kesef Nami explains the Gemara. Loi mi bai. Come, our teacher is a bigger chiddush. Loi mi bai Kesef. Certainly Kesef. The Isru Shava Pruta in Eloi Loi. Of course, Kesef itself will only function if it's worth a Shava Pruta. Avol Tvu and Kelim. When it comes to giving someone Tvu and Kelim, you would think, ironically, it could work even if it's not worth a Shaveh Pruta. Why? Because you get more Hana, the Hana is readily available, the Tvu is right there. So you would think, maybe there is a Kinyan even without it being worth a Shaveh Pruta. Kamash B'lan the Chiddush is that it only works with the Shaveh Pruta. So source number 1 of Rav Yosef, that it has to be davar shekaitzi, something that is definitive, is from Yashiv Ligulasa, as we learn out that Kesef and not Mikesef Miknasa and not Tvuah and Kelim. Why not? Because it's not something which is definitive. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef Minallah, second source. Titania, we learned in a Raisa Smack Minallah. The first one line is Amar. Apologies that our video keeps on turning off. Titania, we learned in a Raisa, Egel, Zet Lipid Yain Bini. If someone gives to a Kayin, he gives him an Egel, a calf, and he says, take this for the redemption of my son, Pidyon Aben, or Talis Zet Pidyon Abi. Instead of giving the Kayin the money, he gives him a Talis, an article. What's the halacha? Loi Amar Klum. He does not do anything, the son is not redeemed. However, if he says Egel Zebechamesh Slayim Lepidyon Bini, or Tal Zebechamesh Slayim Lepidyon Bini, then Benai Padui, then it does work. Says the Gemara, Hi Pidyon Echidami. What's going on over here? If it's not actually worth that value, called kamine, just to say it's worth that value, of course not. Elalav, what's the chiddush? Afal gav dishavi. It is indeed worth that value. So why wouldn't it work unless he says for chamesh slayim? Since it was not definitive. Source number 2 to the rule of Rav Yosef. Says the Gemara, no raya, loy, really, you know what I'm going to tell you? Deloy shavi, really, it's not worth the 5 slayim. So what's the tzad? The kival the kabel kayin alel, yay, but since the kayin accepts it, that's why it should work. Yadir Rav Kahana shakal sudra, mi bei pidyon haben, Amar le, he said to him, Lidi chazi li, chamesh slayim. It's not worth 5 slayim, but the kohen accepts it in lieu or as of the value of chamesh slayim. That's how it's going to work. Amar Ravashi loy amara an el kigoyin Rav Kahana the gaver Rabu. Says the Gemara, says Ravashi, don't bring a raya from Rav Kahana. Only Rav Kahana works because he was a gavra rabbo miboyle sudra areshe, and the chashuv people used to wear the sudra around their head. And that's the reason why he's able to say it's worth to me 5 slayim. But kulei alma loiki hadamar paravashi zavan sudra miime derabba mikuvi shavayasara bit leisar. So 2 potential sources for the din of Rav Yosef and whether we can bring a raya from Rav Kahana or not. Omar Rav Elazar. 7 lines from the white lines, the 2 dots, continues Rav Elazar, Skad Shali B'manav Nasla dinner. If the man says to a woman, become married to me with a mana, and instead of giving her a mana, you only gave her 1 dinar. Harezim Mukudashas Lachas, they're married, but V'yashlim, he has to finish up paying. My time says the Gemara, Akiman Damar mana, V'yavla dinar, Kaman Damar Manastami. We make it as if he said to her, he's marrying her almanas. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Kol Amar almanas, Kaimer me'achshav dami. So it's if he said that there's a stipulation, and it's as if he said me'achshav, and that is the reason why the Kiddushin will work, and we'll also have to finish paying the rest of the money. That is the din of Rav Elazar. So saying a larger sum and paying a smaller sum will not tamper with the Kiddushin. It'll still be a good Kiddushin. You just have to pay the rest afterwards. Meisvei asks the Gemara on this din of Rav Elazar. Says in our Brisa, Skachi li b'mana, married to me with a mana v'yamayne v'haylech, and he's counting the money. And while they're counting, one of them wants to back out of the Kiddushin. What's the halacha? Afilu b'dinar ha'acharoin. Even that last $100, that 100 dinar, whatever the dollar is, equaling the mana. Harshus biyad, able to back out. So we see that there's no kinyan until it's fully paid. Why did Rav Elazar teach us that there's a kinyan, there's a Kiddushin right now, you just have to finish paying? Explains the Gemara, so with this mana, says the Gemara, 1 second, this say if you look at the end of the Mishnah, manazu, reisha manastam, the Gatani say, v'amr las kachli b'manazu, v'nem so manachaz dinar shal l'chayshas, einay megudashas, dinar ra, harezim megudashas yachlav, and you have to switch over a good dinar. So says the Gemara, how could the reisha be such a case if that's the din in the seifa? Answers Gemara, loy, reisha v'seifa damar manazu, they're both talking about a case of manazu. Prusha come in farish, and in classical form, the seifa is explaining the reisha. Keitzad, what's the scenario of back in the last moment? Going to Amar Allah, he says to her, b'manazu. And then that's going to be a case where she would not be able to back out in the last moment. Explains the Gemara, V'achanam Yistarvus is logical. Disach that the Reisha Manastam, Hashem Manastam, Lavi Kiddushin. If he just says the man, it's not a good Kiddushin Manazumi, but of course not. Imishamaha says that itself is law ayah. That's not going to be a raya. Why in classical form again? Tana Seifa Ligluye Reisha. Maybe the Seifa is just revealing and clarifying. What is it in the Reisha? Shalai Taimar, you shouldn't say Reisha Manazu. That the Reisha is talking about Manazu, Aval B'Manastam. It would indeed be a good Kiddushin. So Tani Seifa b'manazu, b'chlal dereisha b'manastam, and yet v'afilu achi loy have Kiddushin. So the Seifa is not a riot, it's a reisha, just revealing what the case of the reisha is. Rav Ashi Amar moinav ahilech, counting and going shiny is not the same as our case. Why? Because when you're counting the daita kule, then your das is on all of it. But in the case where he wasn't counting, then the das would not actually be on all of it. Then there would be a Kiddushin after the first bit is paid, the first dinar. I'll also have to make up the rest. Hi, dinar shal nachayshes, finishing up this part of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, what is the case of dinar shal nachayshes echidam mi'id yadu bei? So he knows what he's getting and he accepted it. He gave it a night. He found amongst other zuzim. If it can't be spent, so it's a new case that you could spend, just difficult, and that would be the chiddush of that part of the brisa that Kiddushin would indeed work. But you have to fix and you have to pay back with a normal coin. Continues the Gemara on the last line. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman. Amar lo eskachili b'manav. He says to a woman, be married to the money. V'nich la mashkin aleo. Einoi mikudeshes. He doesn't actually give her any money. He gives her a mashkin. He gives her a collateral. Says the Gemara, she did not actually receive anything. Therefore, einoi mikudeshes. Explains the Gemara as we turn over to Chesed Beis. Why is there no Kiddushin in this case? Mana inkan. Mashkin inkan. There's nothing. He didn't give her any money. The mashkin is obviously does not have any ownership by the person who accepts the mashkin. Therefore, there is no Kiddushin. Eisei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asks son Rav Nachman, Kitchavim Mashkan Mikudeshes, says the Brisa. The Brisa seemingly indicates that you could get married with the mashkin. Answers the Gemara, Hasan b'mashkin da'achirim. When do we say that Kitchavim Mashkan Mikudeshes is with the mashkin of another person? In such a scenario, he wants to marry a woman by giving her the loan that is owed to him, and he does that by giving her the mashkain, then she does indeed receive something, and therefore it is considered that there is a Kiddushin. And famously, Uchter Rav Yitzchak. And how does this work? This works like Rav Yitzchak teaches. The Amar Rav Yitzchak teaches Rav Yitzchak. L'nayin l'bal chayv she'koinem mashkain. Says Rav Yitzchak, how do we know that the Baal Chayv becomes the owner of a mashkin? Shenemar l'cha tiyat tzedakah. That the pasuk says, and to you it should be a tzedakah. And from here we learn out, emeinai koinet tzedakah minayin mikan the Baal Chayv she'koinem mashkin. This is where we learn out that the Baal Chayv accepts the mashkin. When we look at the full pasuk over here, it teaches us what's going on. The pasuk says that you have to return the mashkin nightly to the borrower. If it's clothing, he gets to sleep in his clothing, etc., etc. And the pasuk ends off. So we see from here, if you're returning it to him, but for you it's considered that tzedakah must be that you indeed owned it, and you're giving it back to him. That's a din of Rav Nachman, that you do own a mashkin. Continues the Gemara, once we explain the din of Rav Nachman, B'nei Rav Huna. The children of Rav Huna, 8 lines down of Chesed Beis. Again, I apologize for the lack of video. Baravin Zavin Ahu Amasa Bepriti. Bought a certain Amasa, bought a maidservant for some priti, for some prutais. Lo Yahave Biyadayu. But they didn't have the money to pay for the maidservant that they purchased. Oisiva Nascha Allah. So what do? They left a silver bar there for the collateral for the payment, and they're going to come back later and pay for the maidservant. L'sai, for the end of the day, the yakir amasa, the price of the maidservant went up. So now, and the seller wants to back out, but the buyer already gave the security to hold the sale. So Aslak made Ravami, Amar lo priti ein kan, naschcha ein kan. Says Ravami, there is no sale, and therefore he's able to back out. Why? You didn't pay yet. The fact that you gave the naschcha, that is inconsequential. You didn't actually make a kinyan on that. Therefore, the seller is able to back out. Tanu Rabbanon is Kacheli b'mana not lasav zekrosa liyam. A man gives mana to a woman and says, "Marry me with this mana." What does she do? She takes the money and throws it into the ocean, or to the fire, or any other way of destroying the money. What's halacha? Einoi mekudesha. She's not considered married because she clearly did not want to get married. She didn't accept the money. She destroyed it. However, hashadinu kamei. But let's say she took the money and she threw it down in front of him. Have a Kiddushin, then it would be a Kiddushin. Ask the Gemara, Kamra lei shakel loy beina. But by putting down the money, she say, take it, I don't want it back. So why are we saying if she left the cash on the floor, then there is indeed a Kiddushin? Explains the Gemara, loy mi bayi kamer. Loi mi bayi, it's obvious. 8 lines to the wide lines. First one line is mi bayi. Shatinu kamei dlavi Kiddushin. If she placed it on the ground, it's not a Kiddushin. Aval zarkos l'yamal ar ema kivnim achayvi beho Kiddushin kadosh nafsha. Says the Gemara, the opposite. Maybe if she destroyed the money, there is a Kiddushin. Why would there be a Kiddushin in that case? Because if she takes his money and destroys it, she has to pay him for it. So therefore, we would think maybe by the fact that she destroyed it, she's obligated to pay him for that money. And therefore, there is indeed a good Kiddushin. So why did she destroy it? Savra batkulu gavra. She figured, I'll check into this guy. And he rasachdo alai, and she thinks she's going to seize this guy, have a bad temper. Does he get upset when she destroys his money? Kamash Mla, in that case is the Chiddush. That even when she throws the money, it's true that she is obligated to pay him for it, but she's rejecting the Kiddushin, and they are not married. Tanu Rabban on 2 lines to the wide lines, and with this we conclude. Hiskachili b'mana. If a man says to a woman, come marry to you with a mana, and she doesn't take the money, but rather, what does she say? To name la'abul avicha, give the money to my father, your father, einoi mikudeshes. But amanashi kablam li. If she says, to give the money to my father, your father, condition they accept it for me, then mikudeshes, they are indeed married. It says the Gemara, Tana Abba aladia koicha dereisha, Tani avicha aladia koicha deseifa. Case of Abba, of her father, teaches us the chiddush of the ratio where they're not married. Your father is the chiddush of the seif that they are married. Almanas that his father accepts it. And finally, back to the Bryce on the second wide line, is Kachli Mamana, and she says to name Pliny, give it to Pliny, Einai Mikudeshes. Al Menashe Kablim Li, condition that Pliny accepts it and Mikudeshes. And now says the Gemara explaining this Bryce of Sricha, why do we need both cases? I would have thought, Sheikh Hamli Avi Kiddushin in such a scenario, if she says Almanas, then it is a good Kiddushin. Why? Why? Because she is a soymech das on her father, his father. So she thinks Avdalisha Chusai, and they're going to be a shlichim for her. Of a Pliny lie, but for Pliny, maybe she's not soymech das if they're not married. Pliny, if only said the second case, I would have thought Pliny in such a scenario, which is give it to Pliny law they Kiddushin. Why? She had just give it to a random guy. Of course, they're not married. She has no sheikhs to that guy. She's no sheikhs to that guy to give them as matana. But maybe when she says give it to Abu Avicha, which she has sheikhs to him, of course. Maybe she means give them as matana. There is a Kiddushin. Sricha, and that is the reason why the Bryce had a list both cases. And actually, let's just give one more Brysa, which is very similar to the previous Brysa. Tanu Rabban, she says, doesn't say to give it to anyone. She says, leave it on the rack. But if it's her rack, mikudeshes. And Abayi Rav Bibi, Sela Shal Shneim. What if they both own the rack together? Mao, Teiku. We don't have an answer. Skachli Bekikar. If he says to her, be married to you with this loaf of bread, today, like Kelvin, just give it to the dog. Eino mikudeshes. But in like Kelev Shalah, mikudeshes. And now Abayi Rav Mari, a similar shayla to Rav Bibi. Kelev Ratz Acharel. If there's a dog chasing after her, Mao, what's halacha? Do we say about one to come nafsha? She's going to be saved by the bread being given to the dog. When she says give the bread to the dog, she's saying in effect save my life, and therefore she gets benefit, and therefore they are married. She can say to him, you have a chiv to save me from the wild dog, and therefore says the Gemara. Teiku, we have to wait for Mashiach before they answer this kasha. And we'll pick up from Iskachli Bekikar 3 lines to the bottom of the next year, B'siyata Dishmaya.